Welcome to Thrive Deeper, an ongoing conversation with Dr. Matthew Jacoby, author of the Thrive Bible Reading Guides, teaching pastor, and leader of the Psalmist band Sons of Korah. Join us as we go deeper into the Bible, discussing the passages as we read them together with Thrive. Now here's your host, DJ Payne.
G'day and welcome to episode 44 of Thrive Deeper. It's DJ here, your old pal, your old chum. And on this week's episode, we're doing things a little bit differently. Matthew and I are going, let's say we're skating out onto the thin ice. We're crawling out onto that thinner branch out there. And we're going to talk about some of the inner workings of decision making and some of the principles about these grey areas that you might be thinking about as we talk about decisions. I think you're going to enjoy this one. It's a little bit different. It's a little bit more conversational. It's a little bit more asking questions, but I'm sure you're going to get a lot out of it. I know it's going to raise some questions for you, so stick around, keep listening, because at the end of the episode, I'll share with you how you can get in touch and send those questions to us. After the break, Matt and I get into it. Goes the new album?
You're trying to make me feel guilty.
So it's obviously going slowly.
It's going very slowly, yeah. It's a time, like it's a time thing for me. But when I do sit down and I work on material, I really enjoy it. But the problem with the creative process is that you've got to be prepared to potentially waste time, yeah. And I hate wasting time. It's this continual struggle that I have with this. But because I want, when I spend time, I want it to be productive. And sometimes you come up with ideas and they don't work. So I have actually been noodling around, and I'm just thought of that because the other day I did actually sit down and I thought, I've got an hour here before I need to do this. I'll just sit down and I'll play around with some ideas, and I came up with some stuff that I might be able to use, but it wasn't particularly productive. But you just have to be up
That's
for
the
that.
creative process.
I don't know if there's so much in me that I've got the creativity to be an artist, but not. But there's other aspects of me that don't work well with.
Yeah, not the patience or the time.
Not the patience of an artist, yeah. Anyway.
That's it. You need to be patient.
Yeah.
Well, that's exciting. That's exciting. The artistic approach, to life is often really, at odds with, a really meticulous type of lifestyle there. Well, we've been going through the book of Proverbs.
Speaking of meticulous.
Yes, and, the principles therein. And we've spent the last couple of episodes talking about the concept of guidance, the concept of decision-making, the concept of being responsible, that God wanting us to be responsible for our own decisions as we, consult Him in what we're doing. But He gives us the principles and the wisdom to make the decisions ourselves. In this week's episode, Matt, I think in light of Proverbs and some of the strong language it uses around certain cultural topics, there are things today that are really hot button issues for people. Some of them to do with art, as we've already mentioned art. Some of them to do with, entertainment and recreation and things like that. That two, Bible-believing, devoted Christians will have two totally different decisions and convictions about. Yeah. So why don't we toss a few of those up? Because I know that people have been thinking about them as we've been going through.
Well, we had it was an interesting question actually that someone brought to me about this. Someone who's reading Thrive and I think listening to the podcast. And the question was around, the first question was, you're a tourist overseas and, in Thailand or whatever. And, do you go into the temples?
Oh.
Do you go and visit them like tourists would generally do? Or is that a no-no for a Christian?
Yep.
What do you think?
Well, like as in, I'm going through X Asian country,
Yeah.
and here's the world's biggest gold-plated Buddha statue.
Yeah.
Do I go
yeah,
get
or
a photo? Or there's a Buddhist temple?
Yeah, I think it's more like if I go into these holy places of other religions, and I guess, should I do that? Is that good for me? Am I somehow going to be tainted with that? Am I playing into the devil's hands in some way? That's the question around that.
Well, I've got pretty strong views on this.
Oh, have you?
Yeah.
Oh, tell me.
I don't think there's anywhere that can taint me as a Christian.
Yeah.
I am, unless, of course, within reason, like I say anywhere, and straight away someone's going to say, well, what about this, or what about...
Yeah, like walking into a strip club or
yeah,
something.
Well, even though I really do believe that there are Christians, and I've met people, women and men, who are called into those type of places, and I believe with all of my heart that they are making an impact in that world.
Wow.
Not for me.
Yeah.
Not for me. So the principle of, if God, calls you to somewhere, but when something like that, which is recreational or relational or educational, I'd say fine.
Yeah.
Because greater is he that is in us than he that is in the world.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't go in there as in, like, I don't want you to imagine me going in there in a like a white safari suit as a as an English man going, oh, I claim this all for the good the good Queen and Christianity. It's not like that. But there is that sort of principle of this is all, like, I've got the truth, and I'm a child of the King, and I don't have to fear that something's going to get me, or I'm opening the door to something. I know what I believe, and I'm happy to be a witness into this place if that's what God calls me to do.
Yeah, I'm very similar, actually. There are some situations. Well, there are plenty of situations that I wouldn't go into that are just not good for me. So, the interesting thing, you mentioned the example of those people called to. When I facetiously mentioned the strip club example, but actually, I've met a guy who that he and his wife and a group actually go to the sexpos, and they minister to people in those, and they have quite a really fruitful ministry actually, and they're very much called to that, and there's plenty of explicit stuff going on all around them, and so just when you think you've got a clear cut, you meet someone that just blows it out of the water. But
let me just say, because I know people are going to be really triggered with what we're saying just now. We're not saying that's for everybody.
No.
And we don't believe God's called you to that. We don't believe God's called us to that. But there are places that God calls people.
And we should say too that this is coming from two guys that have quite conservative, ethical opinions. In those cases, I'm very similar. I've been to India a couple of times, and I don't hesitate to go. In fact, I want to go into the temples, and because I want to understand actually what. Like, I'm a voracious learner, and I want to understand different worldviews, and you just. Like, I want to talk to the people, and I want to understand why they believe what they want. I want to see what this worship looks like, and so
because this is
I'm really happy to go into, and I certainly don't think that I'm being tainted or in any way, because I'm not. I'm not going in there as a worshipper or
endorsing it.
Yeah.
I'll give. Okay, so that's the tourist aspect of it, which I think is a lot more forgivable, if that makes sense. I think a lot more people go, oh, that's fine. You're just a tourist. Away you go. I'll give you something closer to home here that I caused a bit of a stir with some members of our church. I've met a number of times the local imam here at the mosque in Geelong.
Yeah.
Now, let it be known, the local mosque in Geelong meets in an old church, so it's not, don't think of typical mosque. And the imam that I've met and the other Muslim people who fellowship at this mosque, which I know quite a few of, thanks to my boys' schools and their friends.
Yeah.
They are the poster children of moderate Islamic people. They have specifically moved to a place like Geelong, a regional centre like this, because they want to assimilate. They want a better life from where they've come from. Those type of things. I say all that.
It's actually, I've met him too. He's great, really great guy.
Yeah,
really lovely guy.
Lovely guy.
Family, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. The family are great. They're all studying, working, doing really good stuff in the community. And I've met and had good chats with him a couple of times, and he's invited me to the mosque. He said, come along to a service. You would be an honoured guest if you came along. Yada yada. So I mentioned that to quite a few people. You know what? As part of our community, as a member of our community, and someone's here, wouldn't it be great if we showed him that us as Christians, came and said, we love you guys. We're going to come along and be part of it. Well, that was it.
Controversial.
Controversial. I'm mostly arguing that we recant our Christianity and be. And I was like, no. I've also invited him to my church. I've invited him to come along to a service, and I know he's not going to come along to one of my services unless I come to one of his. Yeah. And they were like, and again, I was talking to particular people who were really shocked, and they were like, well, if you went, what would you do? Would you partake in the ceremony? Yeah. And I said, I don't know. Honestly, I said, I don't know. I don't know if I would, if they asked me to kneel, would I kneel? I said, I don't know. I would have to see. I would have to be very prayerful and see where God led me. But even if
it'd be disrespectful if you went and didn't do that, though. So there's a bigger.
That's my point. Because they said, if you went, you could probably stand up the back and watch. And I was like, imagine if we invited them to our church and they stood up the back and watched. We would not. We would think that was very confrontational.
Well, I think we'd be okay with that, but
yeah.
Yeah.
But it would seem very weird. Whereas if people came and partook, you'd have a sense of of getting along. It's a conversation type of thing here. But this was a controversial thing. Because I really even if I felt that God, and I've spoken to other people in the same circumstances. Would you kneel and would you do this and do things like that? I would be like, but I would be kneeling to God. I would be kneeling to my God.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I'm thinking of a time actually in the hinterland of the Byron Bay area. I was speaking at an event there, and I had a big block of time, and I actually just wanted to go somewhere quiet and pray. I thought I'm going to make the most of this time, the only place that I knew of that were near there was a big Hare Krishna property, and it had this big building on it that people just go in and they just sit quietly, and I thought, I'm going there. I didn't tell anyone, but I'm telling everyone now.
And did you convert to Hare Krishna?
No, I didn't. No, but I, it's like that space. This is the thing with spaces. I mean, I'm thinking aloud, which is sort of dangerous here, but I just don't think that I can be contaminated by that space, really. No. Now I'm, if I'm there in the right sort of spirit and then, like I think if you're in God's purpose, you're safe. It's not like, sure, if you're, there are ways in which we can open ourselves up to untoward influence, and even demonic influence. Oh. But that's actually about, it's not just by being in certain spaces, because the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, as Psalm 24 says.
Amen.
So this space doesn't belong to. I don't believe any space belongs to Satan. So I'm not going to. It's not like, I'm trespassing, so he suddenly gets the right to do to me whatever he wants. Well, no, actually, I don't believe any space belongs to Satan, because I believe the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, as the psalm says. So, so I think that's probably my approach to spaces. Now, there are a number of complexities around this, and things that, so for example, I'm thinking of Paul's discussion in Romans chapter 14 about the weaker brother, and
yes,
I need to be careful, like, if I was to take someone who was younger in their faith and with me, and they're looking around, oh, this looks great, I'm going to come back here.
Yes.
And then they got into a conversation, and then that led to, them, and one thing leads to another. And, or if maybe someone sees you go, I don't know, sees you in going along, and they think, oh, so that must be
fine.
okay. And that's fine. And we're in agreement with all of that. So, so I think we're in the realm of decision making, aren't we? It's not like, this is a classic example of where there's not just a black and white rule that we can put, even as, you said quite black and in quite a definitive way that you're happy to go anywhere. Yeah. But I think you would certainly qualify that, wouldn't you, in terms of what effect that might have on other people.
Oh, 100%. Like in the end of the discussion with the group, I said, listen, I would love to put it out there under the umbrella of the elders and the wisdom of the church and the overseers to say, if you would like to come and you feel like this would be a step in the right direction in the concept of, letting other faiths know that we're here and we want to have a conversation, I'm all about it. But if you're coming along to have a sticky beak, or if you're coming along because you're titillated by other faiths or anything like that, then this is not for you. You need to be quite...
It's relational. It's
exactly.
As long as it's legitimately relational.
But that also brings up not just the space, because that also then lends itself to, celebrations, holidays, calendars, things like that have come from...
Well, yeah, we've talked about Halloween before.
Oh, don't get me started.
That's like I've told you this story, but and I think I've mentioned it in a previous episode, perhaps, around when I first went to America, and the church there is all about Halloween, and I was quite shocked because I think just because I came from a point where kind of Halloween has this sort of these dark connotations to it. Yeah. So I was quite taken aback by that. But as I spoke to people, they really won me over as to why they engage with that. And, in terms of reaching their culture. And I'm not going to repeat everything that they said, but I found their reasons compelling. And I thought, well, I'm glad they are doing that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the same. I really do believe... It's like an event, a day, a holiday is slightly different to going into a space. I know there's different, ethical, moral decisions around this, but I really do believe when it comes to a day, there is that principle, yet another Paul principle. Now we go to Paul, with the statue for the unknown God, Mars Hill. Where he takes the culture, he knows what's happening in the culture, and he uses that beautifully with so much wisdom to speak God into the people's lives. And I believe that our culture is crying out for Christians to do this. There are so many opportunities within our culture, whether it's events like Halloween or other things like that, where the culture is saying, speak into us, and where Christians are living out of fear and saying, we heard that the bad people like this day, so we're going to close ourselves in, shut our curtains, and hide under the bed because somehow God's not over this. I don't understand.
Well, that may be a caricature of. There may be people listening who have really strong arguments for why we shouldn't. All I'm saying is that I've heard a really strong argument for why churches do, and I think that's. And I felt very compelled by that, actually. I thought, no, that's coming from a really purpose, oriented thing that they are, in terms of their actions, are very much within, within God's law, and they were being a marvelous witness. So, there may be listeners who may disagree, and that's okay. That's what these discussions are about. Another interesting one is about practices that have origins in pagan religions. And I've been asked about this recently as well, like practices like yoga and acupuncture and, things that have these connections with even like karate.
Yes.
Martial
arts is a classic one.
Martial arts is a classic one.
Yep.
I've heard people say, well, you should never get involved in martial arts because it's all part of a pagan sort of thing. Now I think I'm actually, again, I'm happy to take quite freely from wherever. I think yoga's great. It's healthy. It's the actual exercises themselves. I realise it comes from origins, from a worldview that I disagree with.
Yes,
and I'm more than happy to say that. But if there are things in that are beneficial, then I think it's good to acknowledge that, actually.
And the other concept that I think that, especially around yoga, but also with karate, is some of the arguments that I hear when I really get down to the nitty gritty with it.
Yeah.
When removing the origin argument, because I really do think, quite simply, the origin argument doesn't hold up a lot of times when we talk about where we are in our Christian culture and stuff like that today. That's just me personally. But then, especially about yoga, I've heard people start talking about as if the positions that you're in are somehow magic spells that are attracting, the enemy type of thing. And I'm like, we don't live in this world where, I really don't think we live in a world where I can do some sort of hand gesture, body gesture, pose or something, and unwillingly, without my conscious mind knowing, I've signed a contract with the enemy, and now I've got a demon. Yeah. Because that's what the argument basically comes down with a lot of this type of things, is you're unwittingly playing into the devil's hands and you've somehow got onto his side. And I'm like, I really don't believe the universe. I don't believe the Bible tells us that that's how he operates.
Yeah. Again, that might be a slight caricature.
Sorry, I'm not saying that for
I'm in the academic world. In the academic world, it's important to not caricature the opposing argument. But I find it immensely entertaining, your descriptions.
Anyway. I'm the person talking to people complaining on the phone at the radio station. So they're my caricatures.
Yeah, so send all your complaints to DJ.
I'll take them.
Look, I do agree. I don't think that certain body positions and all can open you up to influence or have some magical effect. I just don't think the universe works like that.
Caveat on that, they can, when you willingly, mentally want that to happen.
Yeah, that's right.
If you're saying, hello, Satan, here I come, and this is what I want, or whatever other spirit you want, of course, but I think it comes from the mind-heart relationship first.
Yeah. I said before that I think it's important to acknowledge, actually, where there is truth and good in other places. I was going to try and use a general word, but so because I think it's important as Christians that we recognise where truth is and name it. I think this is Paul models
100%,
this
100%.
In when he talks to the Athenians at the Areopagus. He quotes from their poets and their and he goes and he talks about their shrine to the unknown God, and I'm going to proclaim this to you. So he begins from where they're at, and he acknowledges where the truth is in their in their system. So I think it's really important. It's not even just a matter of can we. I actually think we should. I think we should acknowledge where truth and good is, and there are various elements of Eastern medicine that have that have come out of sort of pagan origins, and yet they're immensely healthy. That they have they assist the body in healing itself, and it's incredibly respectful, actually, of the way that we're made. So they're it's very kind of non-interventionist medicine. It's just helping the body heal itself, and things like acupuncture and things like that can actually work with the nervous system, and I think that they can be immensely beneficial. They certainly I've never had that, but I know people who have benefited greatly from that, and I don't think, and I think it's good to acknowledge where they're onto something, where there's both good and truth, where there's things that are truthful and beneficial.
Yep.
I think it's great to be able to say, this is really great. I remember reading a book I picked it up in an airport. It was by a Buddhist writer. It's called Buddhism for Busy People.
Yep. And
for some reason, I don't know why, it's just out of an impulse, I just picked this book up and I read it on the plane. And you know, I actually picked it up in quite a critical sort of mindset. I'm going to understand more about Buddhism. And,
yeah.
you know, actually, there were some things in there that really spoke to me.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, like in terms of, there was one part around cultivating compassion, and oh man, it was really well put, and it was so good. And then another section on mental discipline and how meditation works for mental discipline, and I realised how undisciplined my mind is actually, and so I actually applied that in terms of like waiting on God and not just empty my mind, but really focusing on God and being still before God, as indeed the scriptures talk about.
Exactly. Yeah.
And actually it caused me to take responsibility for the fact that when I try to pray, my mind floats all off in different directions, because it was almost like I thought, oh, that just happens passively. But the writer was saying that doesn't happen passively. No, you're doing that. You're trying to. It's like a kind of escapist sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I thought that really convicted me.
Wow.
And God really used that actually to move me forward in my spiritual life. And it was a book by a Buddhist writer. You know, it's like...
All right, well, all letters of complaint about that go to Matthew, all right? All right, let's take a break.
It's my confession.
You've mentioned there good and truth, and you've even mentioned, you know, in passing there about art. Let's take a break. I want to come back, and I want to get into these type of decision-making processes, these guidance principles when it comes to art. DJ Payne and Matthew Jacoby here on Thrive Deeper, episode 44, and we're halfway through talking about guidance, decision making, being responsible for what we do in the area, I'm going to call them these grey areas.
We are getting ourselves in trouble.
Basically,
this could be the last episode.
If you hear that we've both been fired from our positions, you understand it was because of this episode. But we've looked at some of the questions that people have, that believers have about the decision process when it comes to things affecting them, like the external affecting them. If I go to a place or I take part in a other church that doesn't believe the same way that I do, things like that, or even another faith. If I read a Buddhist book or I go to a mosque or things like that, does that affect me? So we've been looking at those questions, but they can be a little bit esoteric out there. I want to get into something that really affects us day to day, and this is the entertainment around us, the art and entertainment around us. Yeah. I know that some art that we have is pure entertainment, popcorn, entertainment, like the movies or the pop songs we listen to or something like that. But then there is art, the music and the movies and the books that stay with us and convict us and challenge us and everything for the rest of our life. Now, in the culture that we live in, a vast majority of what we're consuming in this area is by non-Christians. Is that good, bad? Should we...
No, yeah, well, again, it comes back to the point I was making before the break about the book that I read, that it just contained truth, and I've actually come to the belief that we actually, following, I believe, Paul's example in Acts chapter 17, when he goes to the Areopagus, where he acknowledges and the truth, elements of truth that are there, and he acknowledges truthful things that their poets and philosophers had said, and he works from that, he builds on that. So I actually think that's really important. I think it's, there are, if you're talking in like I love film as an art, and I particularly love, you know, film that is not probably a mainstream film. I get a little bored with the Hollywood blockbuster.
Yes.
And so, you know, I go for films that are sort of your more indie, independent, limited release.
Foreign.
Yeah, they're generally foreign, you know,
Depressing.
often European. No, they're not always depressing. But often, yeah, well, they actually, they are...
bleak.
Yeah, okay. But, you know, and like I have been so challenged by films like, you know, the film Le Havre, which is a French film that just gave such a beautiful... It was such a beautiful celebration of goodness, you know, or films by Michael Haneke that explore guilt and, you know, not even making any conclusions, but almost in a sort of Dostoevskian sort of fashion, you know, validating the fact that this is part of human exists. It's sort of an inescapable part of human existence. You know, I love, you know, the films of Andrei Zvyagintsev, the Russian filmmaker, who just makes films that question society and values, and you just come away with questions and, oh man, this is, you know, so they often require you actually to come halfway. There was a Romanian film actually called Beyond the Hills that was implicitly very critical of religion, actually. And, you know, I felt that's important. That's an important... I wanted to be... I appreciated the point that film was making and the way that it made those points. And I want to engage in those conversations.
Yes.
So, yeah, I benefit a lot from this art form and have been really edified by it. And in a lot of cases, it's not been by Christian people. I mean, you recommended a film to me by Lars von Trier, the one that's set on the stage. What is
Dogville.
It? Dogville.
My all-time favourite film.
I mean, really quite a profound film about grace and judgment and,
but incredibly confronting and traumatizing.
And yet Lars von Trier is way off. I don't know what universe he's in, but spiritually... and yet here is this non-Christian guy that makes a film that has such a strong Christian message.
Yeah.
It was quite remarkable.
Yeah. And that's the challenge. And again, it's not for everybody. I've recommended that film to people who've gotten halfway through and either been disgusted or been bored. Yeah. You know what I mean? But it's not... These arts, you know, and even when it comes to music, finding music, you know, it can be quite hard, especially, and I want you to talk to this, Matt. Some people will say, have a very high conviction, like if the film or the television or the music or the art piece has anything immoral in it, anything that we as Christians wouldn't do, whether that's the language or the... you know, whatever the people are participating in, you know, either, you know, sexual, you know, things, you know, whether implied or explicit, drug taking, or these type of things. They're like, oh no, this shouldn't be anything that a Christian should watch. Yeah, well, there's a couple of different issues there, and I think it's important to separate a couple of different issues out. You know, first of all, those things are like, just speaking generally, that's just life, you know, and I'm not that. In general, those things don't particularly worry me. Where in terms of sexual content, I think I just want to separate that one out because it's just not good for me as a guy to be confronted with that. Yes. That's not. So I actually and even like, I mean, even in terms of gratuitous violence and I do have lines that I draw actually. Mm-hmm. Interestingly, talking about Michael Haneke, he made films like Blue Ribbon and probably films that people have never heard of. Yes. But sorry, The White Ribbon. I mean, he's won heaps of awards, but he made a film called Funny Games, which the film was designed to punish
audiences for their love of horror
Yep.
and gratuitous violence.
Yep.
So here is a filmmaker that actually wants to punish audience. So he makes a violent film to specifically punish people for their gratuitous love of violence. But the interesting thing about this film is that you don't see any violence. It actually could be G-rated in terms of what you see, but it's so psychologically disturbing.
But you can't walk around recommending that.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I bought it because Michael Haneke, you know, and then I thought, I actually chucked it out afterwards because I thought, first of all, I thought this is brilliant.
Yes.
Like, this film is prophetic.
Yeah. It is.
I mean, it's just exposing something. Like, I felt afterwards disgusted that I'd ever enjoyed gratuitous violence. You know, I mean, and I thought, wow, that's what good art should do. It should challenge you, you know. But I chucked the movie out because I thought it was so disturbing. I don't want my kids, like, so psychologically disturbing, that I didn't want my kids to even accidentally come across it. And yet I think its message about gratuitous violence was a really valid one. So I have a bit of an issue. I mean, it's interesting. I don't know how. So there are two issues here. First of all, there's the issue of sexual, you know, content. I mean, first of all, I mean, do I want to endorse an industry that has you know, that will have people having sex on? I just that I have a bit of a issue with. But even with me confronting that, being confronted with that, it's just not good for me as a guy. So I actually look at ratings and I actually go onto IMDb, which is International Movie Database. Yeah. And I look at the parental guide, not for my kids, actually. I look at it for me, you know, because I want to see what sort of kind of, you know, like I don't mind, you know, implied sexual content. Or I mean, and I can't draw black lines. Yes. And in fact, there are films that I have really loved where I felt like even the sexual content was just a necessary part of really a message, even though I perhaps felt that could have been done a little bit more, tastefully, a lot more modestly. Yes, you know. Yes, okay. So you know, I can disagree with the way that it's done, but nevertheless,
you understand why the storytelling.
I understand why the storytelling. Well, I mean, the thing is, a lot of sex and violence though is put in there for you know, just to be gratuitous, you know, and that annoys me. It's just gratuitous sex and violence in films. And I don't think it's good. But, you know, like there are thrillers and you know, that can like, what are your thoughts about? Oh, like, look, horror films? Give me.
Don't even look. I'm gonna. We're both skating on very thin ice here, crawling right out to the edge of the limbs here. But first off, I want to say to those who are listening who have very, very strong convictions about, you know, about what you watch, especially movies and music and stuff, and what you take in. I applaud that. I think that's really, really good. And I've gone through stages of my life where I've been in that same place. Yeah. And I don't want want anybody to listen to think, oh, a mature believer can get away with this or that or watch it. It's not about that.
No, I've just said, I look up the parental guide on the... and
Exactly. But, you know, I'm thinking of the you know, I've recommended friends, TV shows, and there's one I'm recommending at the moment online that I'm rewatching because the next season is about. I'm not even going to mention the name because I think it's fantastic, but I've had people watch it and be disgusted, like literally write to me and say, I'm brokenhearted that you recommended that because it has language in it, because it has drug use in it, because it has things that are not edifying in it, and I want to say to them, you know, you've got to go through some of the bad stuff through this film because it has a purpose. It has like, we're setting up characters and we need to know what they're like. Yeah. So the redemption makes sense at the other side of it. But I don't want to... But it's not necessary. This is art. Yeah. This is my appreciation of it. I don't want to ever push it onto anybody else. So
it is a matter of, you know, individual... I mean, it's interesting because I showed a Michael Haneke film that had suicide scene in it. You know, it's quite disturbing. And someone actually that I recommended that film to was really quite disturbed by that scene, and I should have, I should have been more sensitive in that. So I really, but then I asked myself the question: should I be more sensitive to that?
Yeah.
So there's still a lot of questions in my mind. I mean, I haven't landed. I have a. I suppose I really appreciate the art form of film, and I think it can do so much. I'm also fine with just straight entertainment. Entertainment is a wonderfully human thing, and that's great. That's fine. But I also the line is, you know, has moved for me, you know, and I've been, I guess it's difficult to say things absolutely categorically. I do believe there are certain lines that we can draw in terms of gratuitous sex and violence in films. I just, and yet at the same time, I don't want to be, I don't want to dogmatically impose that. Those limitations around the art form, a little bit like, you know, painters that maybe paint nudes, or you know, I think that's different to, you know, a centerfold, you know, like, and yet there are people that say, well, how is it? It's it's no different. Yeah. And I guess they've got an argument for that, but then I would say that my point is a bit more subtle. It's a difficult area. At the end of the day, every really person has to make the decision for themselves. It really is a tricky area when it comes to the arts and music, movies, you know, photography, all of these type of things that we move into. It can be quite tricky. Like, here's another one. Okay. Here's another one. I don't know if I've got time for another one. My kids are massive Harry Potter fans. Woo! Oh, massive Harry Potter fans. Send the letters to Matthew Jacoby, care of. Yeah. Bad parenting 101. Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, again, it was actually, I mean, that the Rowling book that really got, in terms of my daughter, that really got her reading. I mean, she now is a voracious reader, and it was the quality of that piece of writing for kids. I mean, she, you know, I mean, in fact, I would say the same with my son as well. I mean, he read the whole series in like 2 weeks. Wow. You know, and they're 7 massive volumes, and my, you know, so now it was interesting. Like, I mean, they under, you know, it's all just play magic, and I mean, I don't, because the funny thing is, I know, and the people that I know and very much respect have made a decision not to, because of the magic content in there. Now, the interesting thing is, there's a book, and my daughter wanted this particular book, and she got it for her birthday, actually, and you know, we didn't really look at what was inside the book. It was a Harry Potter, you know, it was something about Harry Potter, and absent-mindedly, you know, we got that for a birthday. When I looked through it, it was like history of magic, and it had all of this really full-on occult stuff in it. Like real, you know, life? I mean, and no connection, like not, it wasn't J.K. Rowling, doing that, or, but I actually took it back. Wow. You know, because I didn't want my kids to have exposure to that. Now, a lot of people say, well, what's the difference? That proves that you're wrong. What's the difference? and look, you know, maybe, maybe I am, but, and I do, but the fact is that that's an ongoing thing. It's an ongoing conversation that I have with my kids. We talk about it. I just don't think that the answer is sheltering them from it necessarily. Yep. Like, you know, my kids go to a state school. They're confronted constantly with all different views. All the kids are into Harry Potter. They, you know, it's the world in which they live. You know, I'm happy to say to my kids, "Oh, you read it, and tell me what you think." You know, and so, you know, we've talked about magic and this and that, and that's make believe, and there's some real dark things here as well, and what, you know, and actually it's opened up conversations. So I'm, you know. Probably my approach and this is a very personal thing, and other parents will have different approaches, is to probably more on the allowance side. I'm happy to allow, my kids to have some exposure to that, but as long as it's in the midst of a conversation. So yeah, what do you reckon?
Yeah, I'm loving it. I think you've brought it full circle, Matt.
You're not going to get out the matches and light me up.
No, I'm not bringing out the holy water or anything like that. No, I think we've brought it full circle because we started this conversation about guidance and decision making, about God wanting us to take responsibility, and it's all about relationship with Him.
Yeah.
These decisions that we're making about art and movies and the ones that you're bringing up about your family life and everything like that are great illustrations that these decisions that we're making are not outside of that of that process.
Yeah.
The entertainment that we're choosing. Look, personally, I'll just say this and I'll move on because I could spend a long time talking about this. I have big troubles with people, having issues with some of the things that I find artistically amazing.
Yeah.
That might have troubling scenes in them. And then they go on to tell me how much they love the latest reality TV show and they watch that every night of the week.
Yeah, or another example of that is there are plenty of people who would condemn Harry Potter but love Lord of the Rings. Yeah. It's like, what?
I personally can see the difference there, but that's just me. But I'm not a Harry Potter fan, but that's my persuasion.
Okay, wizards and
No. We're going into a different topic here. But my point is, it's easy. Getting back to what was the word that you said about cause and effect? Casuality?
Casuistry.
Okay.
Which is applying a rule to every single little scenario.
And I think we can get into trouble when we try to do this around some of the entertainment and art that other people enjoy.
Yeah.
If it's a conviction for us, fine, let it be a conviction for us. But if we try to make that for somebody else as well, it's not as black and white. You might have no trouble in spending hours every night watching the latest reality TV shows and things that I consider those to be morally disgusting, and I would never want anything to do with them. Whereas the art that they would turn around and see me watch, is the same. Yeah. It's those principles, I think, that we have to be open and saying, okay, what are the principles that Proverbs give us? What are the principles that God is teaching me? What should I be taking responsibility here?
Yeah, and I think it's important to have these, be able to have these conversations and to share, because wisdom is something that you gain through conversation and through sharing experiences I value that, because let's face it, where we stand on these things, like, we could be completely wrong.
Yeah.
And I think we're both quite willing to admit that, but we make decisions as best we can, and this episode isn't about saying we do this, therefore this is the right thing to do. No, it's just to, I guess, what we've done today, which is a little different to what we do mostly, is that we've shared very complex scenarios that really aren't clean cut, and I guess some of the decision making around that. And I think this goes to underscore the fact that we're always making decisions that are rarely clean cut, and I think it's important to recognise that they're not completely clean cut, and that we can't just apply a rule. That we actually have to apply wisdom and process, and this may be appropriate for this person, but really not for this person, and I think we need to be open to that sort of variation. I think this connects with Paul's discussion around eating food sacrificed to idols in Romans 14-15. It really is about relationship. It's us about being really self-aware, knowing what's good for us and being honest with ourselves actually about what's good for us. I think that's an important thing. I think we need to pray about, if in doubt, we should pray about things, and again, ask God to give us the wisdom and insight and self-knowledge to know what is good for us and to recognise that. And then I think we become good decision makers. We're never perfect decision makers. I could be making plenty of wrong decisions now, but hopefully hopefully we can create a context where things can be discussed, and this is where community comes in. If in doubt, talk to people, talk about other people's approach. How do you go with this? What's your approach? Without fear of even thinking, if I even open up the subject, I'm just going to get crucified. No. Let's be open and when being on the other end of that and giving advice, don't give advice like it's law. Give advice like it's advice, and recognise that wisdom is very particular. Wisdom focuses on particular situations and particular people. There's general principles, but in terms of what actually we should do in this situation, it's governed by wisdom, but it needs to be different for each person in each situation. To me, that makes sense, and we've talked about the Proverbs being all about common sense.
So there you have it. Decision making when it comes to art, films, religion, temples. We went there. We went all over the world today and asking our questions. Hopefully you have stuck with us through that. Hopefully we haven't offended, and hopefully you have seen some of the wisdom that we are trying to flesh out as we're making these decisions. We've been very open and honest with some of the processes that we're going through in our lives, and I hope that you can be open and honest as well and share with us what you think. Did what we say today make sense? Did you agree? Did you disagree? We would love to hear from you. It's really simple to do. Head over to thrivetoday.net.au. That's got linked to our Facebook page, our Facebook group, where you can share stuff privately, or it's also got our address there where you can send us an email directly and get it straight to us so we can answer it here on the show. But either way, we would love to hear from you. Until next week, this has been DJ Payne on behalf of Matt, Stu, and the crew here at Thrive Deeper. Thank you so much for listening.